We'll get underway to this full council meeting. I'll open with karakia e te whānau o te kaunihera o te aorere. Whaia te motoranga kia marama, kia whai taki, kia whai mahi, katoa, tū mai, tū kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, tihei Māori ora. Firstly, any apologies? I don't think we do. I think everyone is present either online or in person. No public forum, declarations of interest. There are none, I presume. So that brings us to the topic of today's meeting. So I'll come across to Leonie to make some introductory comments, and then I'll come across to Amy to lead us through the report, and she will be supported by Dwayne, Matt, and it says Jamie. We'll take Jamie being here in spirit. Is it? Oh, there you are, Jamie. So support if required. So I'll come across to Leonie.
Kia ora koutou. Look, I feel like it's been quite a long time coming, really, for this day. We've done a lot of work, and really some of this work started way back in September when we realised that we were facing some overspends in some of our operations, and you'll hear more about that next week, but how we're going to address those. So we started at that stage a business review process. I think that that has been really helpful, not just for this annual plan, but for future. We
Hello. Good comment about the other day.
It was a good comment, yeah.
So whoever happens to have their microphone on in the Zoom meeting, you might want to just make sure it's off.
Thank you. Yes, so the information that we've gathered, it's taken a lot of time, but we've gone really in-depth, really vertically into operation and to really scrutinise every line. And although we did that in the long-term plan, I feel this process has also really made us, forced us into a position where we're really thinking about what was essential and what we could actually let go of or potentially do better. And we have done quite a bit of that. We've looked at all our resources. We understand that our communities are facing challenges as well, and we don't want to increase the demands on their budgets. The level of scrutiny as well has helped into our business review has also helped us understand how our business operates across also horizontally and how we work with each other. And I think that we've found opportunities for some savings there, particularly in our staff space. So that's been really, really useful. So today I've got a couple of thank yous really. I want to really thank the staff who've worked on this. You, Amy, Dwayne and the team, you've done an amazing job. I know the late night emails I've been getting. I know the amount of hours you've put into this, way above and beyond the normal 40 hours per week, and a lot of staff have been doing that because it matters, and it matters to us because we also live in the community. And we have a real passion to make sure that we're serving people well and as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we know every dollar matters, and I know these staff really cared about that. I also want to thank the councillors. It's not easy for elected members to go through this type of process. It's much easier when we can just say, yes, we can go away and do it and find all those savings. It's easy to say, we'll go away and find $1 million saving, and then it's up to us. It's great that you've been at the table with us. Ask the right questions. If they've been really good questions, and I'm sure you've learned a lot more about our entire operation than probably perhaps even through the LTP process. So thank you for your questions, your dedication, your support and help, and the challenges that you've given us. It's not, it's not easy, but actually we do need to be challenged. I think it's good for us to hold each other to account. And then also special thanks to my executive team, because when you're leading an organisation, and you know your staff are under stress, it requires a special type of leadership. And I've seen quite a lot of that through the executive team and through the right down through our leaders throughout the organisation. But that comes from the top, and I just want a special thanks. And a difficult time for them as well. I was stepping aside for 2 months during that period. It wasn't easy, so a special thanks there to Steve. So look, today we know we'll go through this. Hopefully it's what you're expecting. I shouldn't be any surprises in here. Yeah, we're happy to answer questions. We've got a good team behind us. If we can't answer it today, we certainly will get that to you as quickly as we can, hopefully during the meeting if there's something particularly you need to make a decision. But other than that, I'll now hand over to you, Amy, because I think you're going to take us through the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonie.
Thanks, Barney. Amy, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just do a brief summary of the report before you get into running through it. So the LTP 2024 to 34 anticipated an overall rates revenue increase of 7%, excluding growth, and net debt of 290 million for 2025-26. A range of cost pressures are increasing our costs for 2025-26, and the primary drivers include higher than anticipated interest rates, depreciation funding, electricity costs, maintenance costs, and new costs involved in water supply regulation from central government. Expenditure forecasts for the current financial year indicate that the council will have a greater net operating deficit than planned in the LTP. Staff have been implementing a range of measures to reduce expenditure, which is resulting in real savings to the current year. But the higher deficit will affect the financial starting position going into the 25-26 annual plan year. To try and limit the impact of the increase in costs on the rates increase for the 25-26 year, the council has proposed increasing most fees and charges by 10%, indicated an interest in selling unencumbered ETS credits to offset the forecast overspend for the current financial year, and carried out a business review process to identify other opportunities to reduce costs and/or increase revenue. Staff presented opportunities from the business review process and sought your feedback through a series of workshops taking a deep dive into our teams, what they do and how they're funded. This report enables the council to make decisions about these proposed changes to include in the annual plan 2025-26, which have amounted to a further savings of 3.75 million. The net outcome of these changes is that the rates revenue increase for the next year will be 8.8%, excluding growth for 2025-26, and net debt will be 299 million. Changes from the LTP for 25-26 must be detailed in the annual plan, and council must consult on these changes unless they are not significant or material. Given the proposed changes from year 2 in the LTP 2024 to 34, staff consider that the council is required to consult on the annual plan before making final decisions. This report provides advice about how the consultation should be carried out over a short period, and if accepted, a consultation document will be submitted for approval next Thursday. The proposed water charges for the services supplied to Nelson City Council and the Nelson Industrial Water Supply Area have now been calculated, and targeted consultation will also be carried out on these charges. Today, we are seeking decisions on the sale of unencumbered ETS credits, reducing the operating deficit for the current financial year. The proposed changes from the LTP 2024-34 for year 2, 2025-26, and consultation on the annual plan. There have been discussions regarding the removal of rubbish bins and doggy do bag dispensers from our reserves, toilet closures or reduced cleaning of these facilities. As the Chief Executive has advised, we will be retaining these services funded from within the existing fiscal envelope. I'd also like to draw your attention to Resolution 9 regarding paid parking in Richmond. This has been amended to be clear that weekends and public holidays will be excluded from the charge structure. Finally, we acknowledge and appreciate your engagement and commitment to this year's annual plan process. Today, you've got the annual plan team here, Dwayne, Matt and Alan via Zoom, and we've got our GMs and managers available to support your discussions and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for the introduction. And so just to reiterate, I guess, what Leonie and Amy have covered off. So there has been an enormous amount of work, which obviously councillors have been intimately involved with over probably a 6-month period. And this is the culmination in terms of deciding what to go out with draft annual plan. And as Amy has pointed out, going through a consultation process to get feedback from the community on it. So there are a number of steps left to go before it's finalised, but getting to this point I think is crucially important, and it has involved a lot of compromise, and we've tested a couple of things that have played out in the community potentially as I guess might have been expected, and that has resulted in some changes to some of those proposals. So I guess that's the informal consultation process, which is the ideas were proposed. The feedback came in a kind of informal fashion, and that's resulted in some changes. And now we go out through a more formal process of consultation and feedback. So again, be interesting to see quite where that pans out. But again, I'd just like to reiterate what Leonie said. Thanks to everybody, both elected members, because there has been a huge involvement of elected members throughout this process and contribution to where we've arrived at today, and also to staff right across the organisation, from the leadership team right down through, because there is a lot of detail that sits behind what is a relatively high level resolution. And that requires the contribution of a lot of people to make sure that all those moving parts fit together. So with that, I'll open it up for discussion, questions, particularly if there are any, and at some point moving and seconding resolutions. So it is open for feedback.
A little start of again.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair Tim. The interest rates, PwC have suggested what they, or forecasting what they think interest rates will be. How confident are we in relying on that, given our recent past experience?
Matt.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start with my initial thoughts, but I will pass over to Mike. Given his experience in these matters, but certainly PwC did provide us updated figures for the annual plan 25-26, over and above what they'd given us for the 10 years of the LTP, and that number was higher, and that was the result of the world environment we live in, etc. A whole lot of external factors. So we did an exercise internally through one of my staff members who has a lot of ability in terms of drawing information out of the various stuff, very similar information to what PwC do, to try to second guess it and make sure we were very confident in terms of what that amount was. So that did happen. We've always had a contingency on top of what PwC provide, just because we're accountants, essentially. And it's better to be conservative and obviously not get in a situation like we are in for the 24-25 financial year. So we're as confident as we can be, but we are at the bottom of the world, and we're only an announcement away, I suppose, from something going against us. But I might pass to Mike if he had further comments to make. Mike.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's worth remembering, and councillors will be quite familiar with the Treasury report, which we bring through on a quarterly basis, that a portion of our debt is fixed rate. So those rates are locked in, either directly borrowing at fixed rates or the use of interest rate swaps. So around 65% of our debt for the annual plan year will be at a rate we know is not subject to market movements. And that still does leave us with an exposure to what would happen in the interest rate markets, particularly in the short term, based on what's called the BKBM rate. So there is still some risk that if interest rates go up for whatever reason, whether it's international or locally, then we will have to pay additional costs above what we've budgeted for. It's worth remembering that the short-term rates in the sort of 1 to 2 year space are based very much on what the OCR is within New Zealand. The long-term rates, 5 to 6 years out, won't affect the annual plan. They are more affected by what happens with the US and what happens within the US financial markets. In the middle terms are a little bit of both. So in short, we've got a level of cover that's fixed in. There is some risk that if interest rates go up within New Zealand, we will, in the short term, we may have some exposure. We have some exposure to do that, but I'm reasonably confident that we have adequate cover and budgets for the annual plan year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Maybe the first one, the $9 million extra debt that's going to sit on our books at the end of the financial year, what impact does that have on 26-27? And I guess the key question is, I see we're projecting a 7.1% increase 26-27. What does the current LTP say it would have been?
Matt or Mike?
Off your top of your head.
Well, firstly, the impact of the extra 9 million, and secondly, what was the LTP for the following year compared to the 7.1?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly the extra $9 million will have flow on. Obviously, we pay interest and loan repayments on that. So it's, as a rough order, it would be about $900,000 with based on a 4.5% interest rate, and the loans repayable in about 20 years. So that's in the order of that. In terms of the LTP, I'll come back to you. I'll find a document. I've got a feeling it's 4.5. Oh, no. I won't get I'll come back to you.
So just those two questions together. So is the extra debt level that we've got been factored into the 7.1 re-projection for 26-27, and what was it previously? And then probably a Richard question. So if I'm right in reading the report under 6.10 and 6.11, there's a total of $722,000 that have extra costs in terms of monitoring for water for Te Mata Arawai, levies from Te Mata Arawai and the Commerce Commission. So are those additional $722,000 fees that are being imposed by the new regulator that we have no control over?
The answer is yes.
So I guess that's, and there lies one of our problems, isn't it? Is that we don't always have those controllable costs. Just through the Mayor, Mr. Mayor, at what stage can we have discussion about detail? Because there's probably some proposed increases in here that
You are welcome to raise them at this point in time.
So I guess if I go to 6.71 in terms of the increased regulatory compliance budget, I'm still not over the line from in terms of just because we've brought it in-house, and I understand the 17A report, we've got an increased level of service. I'm just not sure in this environment that we're increasing essentially a level of service and a better service compared to what we had in an environment where we're cutting back everywhere else. So I'm just testing it. I'm uncomfortable about that extra $222,000 in this year. I don't know who's going to answer it or where we go.
I'm happy to kind of broaden out the question somewhat. So I take it the majority of that relates to dog bylaw management, hence the in-house conversation, etc. We are currently consulting on the fees and charges as part of the same process. This is the budget for consultation. Should the decisions around the dog registration fees based on the feedback we get on the schedule fees and charges create another decision from the council, how might that be reflected through this process? So I guess one of the options is, should the council take a different track and this budget not be required, given it is a budget, there would end up being some surplus at the end of the year, or alternatively, should the council consult on the fees and charges and decide based on the feedback to make a different decision around their registration fee, which funds this, that would then necessitate a review of the service being provided. Can someone just round out how these two processes work together?
Through the Mayor, I guess the key thing is to what extent that, and I think Kim is here, he might be able to talk to this, or Shannon, to what extent that 222 provides an increased level of service, essentially a question, or is basically a base level of compliance we need to adhere to, and therefore not really related to the fees revenue. So I invite Kim to talk to that if that's okay.
Kim, welcome.
Through the chair. The first point to make is in relation to what we were doing beforehand, before we needed to bring this service in-house. And there we had a situation where a payment was being made which proved to be unsustainable for the operator. So they could not continue to function at the level of funding that they were receiving. So that was a big part of why they walked away from the renewal of the contract, because simply it was unaffordable to them. Then we're faced with the prospect of what to do. it would to deliver those regulatory functions, and that went through the 17A review to assess that the best thing for the council to do is to bring those services in-house. So we've progressed past that point. Then the third thing is, okay, then what is the nature of the services that we need to provide for the upcoming year to deliver not only what was being done beforehand, but also to deliver to the new requirements that are coming through the dog control bylaws. So there's a expanded set of bylaw requirements, and then pricing up that with the same number of people involved and adding in a team leader, because previously the contract came with a party that was running the operation, effectively acted as a manager. So we have the same number of people coming across with a team leader, and when we add that, the cost of doing that, that's how we arrive at the number. As the chair has mentioned, a big chunk of this money comes through user pays side of the ledger. So the dog aspects of that are 95% funded by the registration fees, 5% funded by general rate. And then as we move through the other functions, the parking is again essentially funded from the charges that are incurred for parking offences. The third element for this, the new function, is around freedom camping. And freedom camping doesn't give us a return for services, so this is effectively a ratepayer funded service. And we are in the process of reviewing the freedom camping bylaw, and that is and ultimately that's going to require us to have an enforcement capability of some sorts. So with all of those things put together in the package, where we've arrived at for the increased cost is what you're looking at.
Through the chair to answer the balance of your question then, so it's a base level of compliance regulation. So if you, through the fees and charges process, you opt, for example, to lower the dog registration fee, it needs to be made up through rates revenue.
Or reducing the level of service. The component of the increase, that is a level of service, one way or the other.
Okay. So just one more and then one other question. So what I believe, and I think it was in the 17A report, was somewhere I've read, is that we were increasing parking monitoring in Motueka from 1 day a week to 5 days a week. So that's the level of service I'm talking about in terms of, I've read it somewhere extending, and I'm going, I'm not sure if Motueka's asked for it, I'm not sure if council's asked for it, so I'm just testing the level of service change. Does seem, and I think my colleagues across Golden Bay are probably pretty happy in terms of an increased level of service that they may have had since the new contract has been in place, and they've been asking for a long time. But I just can't remember those conversations around this level of service increase. And then I've got one last question.
Cool.
So through the chair on that one, so there's a certain amount of parking service which is required provided across the district, and how we demarcate that point is a matter that is fine-tuned with each of those locations. And there's an active discussion with the Motueka at the moment around the extent to which actually they desire that type of function, and that is currently being readjusting where the service will apply. But we're basically dealing with an overall increased or greater demand of what we can service regardless. So by cutting back in Motueka will mean that we're more able to deliver on expectations elsewhere in the district.
Thanks, Kevin. And I just want to recognise that you were the first to restructure your building compliance when you had that overrun. But my last question is in terms of property sales. We've got a property sale budget for this financial year, correct? And then we're proposing 1 million the following year.
Thanks, Ken. Mike, do you want to?
Just the figures, it's 1 million this year. It was then 1.5 per the LGP for the next 2 years. But we've added an additional million to each of 25, 26, and 26, 27.
So it's additional. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification, that 222K that you were just talking about, Mr. Drummond, did I hear you say that that includes the regulations that we will be putting on with the monitoring for freedom camping, which is a bylaw we're yet to review? Or are you going to come back wanting more money for that?
That will largely depend on the decision we make about the freedom camping bylaw. we could say we don't want anything, in which case it will cost zero.
Yeah.
Did he
If
not
we do
mention
want
that in
something,
his speech though
Yeah,
about
so no,
freedom
there-
camping?
So through the chair, there has been an existing level of service to the freedom camping bylaw arrangements as they've set.
Yep.
We have assessed on continuing that level, but should the bylaw be more prohibitive, then we would need to assess what level of compliance needs to go with it. So if things are roughly similar, although they may vary inside the nature of the bylaw, one would imagine that we've got sufficient resource to continue the function that we've had in the past, and that we won't be needing additional resource. But if council would want a greater degree of specificity, then it could go that way. But we're dealing with a new sort of national direction, and the national direction is more open to freedom camping than, I guess, previously.
happy days. So I think the answer is the 222 assumes the same level of service. Should, through the bylaw process, a council wish to do more in that space, it would require a consideration of more resources. Thanks, Kim.
And I have one further question, and it's probably worth noting from my perspective, is that we've done a lot of workshopping, probably 13 or 14 of them, over, this paper, and we've had to digest a lot of stuff. One thing that I was surprised to read in here, which we didn't come back to a workshop and discuss, was the reducing in the staff salary budget of 1.4 million. So I thought we were going to bring that back to a workshop, because actually I don't know the implications of what that means on the level of service for our council.
Also, that is
not saying I don't support it. Please hear me when I say that.
no,
but I
I'm just
haven't had that teased out. It's just a figure.
well. That was exactly the whole point. Because if you want to go through, we'll be here forever trying to figure that out. So the direction which has been followed through into this is we provide the direction and the budget, and then it is over to the council staff led by Leonie to figure out how and where that comes from. This is the inevitable challenge you have about how much you want to dictate and how much you want to set the strategic direction, and then enable Leonie to work through how that's going to be delivered. So if you want to, and you won't, because it's a chicken and egg, unless you provide the direction, you're not going to know where those things are going to happen. Conversely, if you want to make a decision at a governance level about specific locations and areas and numbers, that leads you down a whole nother path. So this is a direction that we've indicated we wish to see for this report, and the consequences of that will be
apparently minimising the impact to our core business.
exactly, which is again the principle on which we've made the suggestion and the number. Right, thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Butler.
Thanks. I was just wondering, just a clarification about insurance costs, and that I know that we've had discussion about insurance costs in the past, and so as regards the primary drivers of the increased costs, they're not mentioned there, but what is mentioned is numerous other smaller increases. So it would be just good to know, very briefly, where we are at with insurance costs at the moment as regards this long-term plan.
So in terms of the increase, the percentage that relates to insurance costs, both the dollar figure and percentage, Matt?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, the insurance costs actually decreased. So I think we had about $4.6 million in the LTP. We've reduced that by $700,000. With work progressing to actually secure the savings I throw through the brokers, etc., through our insurance partners. So it's actually a reduction. It's not an increase in terms of the rates number.
So that's a good news story.
Yes.
Just to clarify, the gross number with the same level of insurance increased, and what has happened is staff have proposed a review of the insurance cover to keep the number below what it is currently.
So I think it's a good news story and a risk management story. So it's good news as far as the premiums go, But like all discussions around insurance, there's a bit of a trade-off in terms of level of cover, etc. So it's something we just have to constantly keep reviewing as the insurance market constantly kind of moves.
Steve might want to.
Steve.
Yeah, it's true, Mayor. You're absolutely right. Like for like, all things being equal, the cost of insurance would have gone up considerably. But what we have elected to do is to spend a considerable amount of time examining our asset base and how we might better and more effectively ensure what we've got within a reduced cost. So there'll be some things, for example, that we might take a risk position on that we choose not to insure. Or there might be some things where we choose to have a higher level of deductibles when we consider the risk that I don't know, something might burn down. We're going to take a higher level of deductible should we decide to replace that asset.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mailing and Councillor Mackenzie.
Right. Well, I've got two questions. So the first one relates to 1.4.2 and the extra 104,000 for our ongoing representative, Local Government New Zealand, Te Taitura and Te Ura Kahika. One I understand is I see value in the Local Government New Zealand lobbying, but the other is basically a staff lobby group or research group. And I understand that's about 130,000. That
not for Taitura. It's a much smaller figure. Te Ura Kahika is, but that is not a staff related thing. That's a regional council function.
Research.
Yeah, research. Yeah, largely research and information creation. Yep.
Yeah. I just wonder about the value of that. That's a question. Because that's an additional 104 on top of probably 300, I would think, in total.
No. So I think the total number, there is a total number of the combination of Te Ura Kahika, LGNZ and Taitura. It actually might be close to 300, 200 and something. Does anyone know what that figure is off the top of their head?
I raised it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's around 250k. So essentially, the 104k increase was because it was omitted from the LTP. So we're actually just getting it up to 250. It was through the must, could, should process. It was removed.
And my other question is in relation to the increased costs for wastewater in NRSBU. I see that's 242,000. And I read a submission this last week in relation to Mana ROI's
Taumata ROI.
Yeah, that's it. Document that they put out in relation to wastewater and the costs that could be going forward is considerable. So there's 242,000 there, and a lot of that is to do with, I understand, it with revaluations and the resilience that we put in by paying for the extra pipeline that comes out here. But to me, that if you look at our increases for most of this, it's driven by central government in terms of wastewater, drinking water and stormwater. So we need to make sure we tell that story properly, but the increases are going to keep coming, which is a real concern for our district. Because I looked at my rate bill and there's about $1,700 relates to water out of a $4,600 bill. So, that's going to get worse going forward. Now, I just think we need to tell that story when we go out there. So some of that's a question. Some of it's a statement.
Yeah, which is why the conversation about local water done well is critically important to everybody, because it is a very significant part of both our debt profile and people's rates bill, if you are connected to those services. Any comment in relation to the impact of NRSBU and other impacts on water and wastewater particularly?
The NRSBU one is probably not something from central government. That's something that we have to manage ourselves because we do have overflows at Beach Road Pump Station. So we asked the NRSBU to upgrade the capacity of that pipeline and we're paying for that share of that cost.
The other increase is actually how we discharge to sea. Because we're only discharged to an estuary and it goes out on the outgoing tide, the new rules that they're proposing mean either
another whole conversation. So the draft national standards that are being consulted on by Taumata ROI have a number of significant issues with them. The concept of behind which is laudable, but that is a classic example of a one-size-fits-all national directed set of criteria that have potentially very big impacts on areas where you discharge of wastewater in a certain way. Yeah, and that, I presume, the feedback we are providing to that process will be highlighting the implications of that particular issue for us, and no doubt Nelson City Council as well. Thank you, Dwayne.
Mr. Mayor, just in relation to the subscriptions to the sector representatives, I mean, others can defend Te Ura Hika and Local Government New Zealand, but I'll just say Taituara, for the price we get from them, $20,000 a year, incredible value for the organisation would be my take on it. I mean, I know we come to you and we tell you about sector change and things like that. A good half of the knowledge we get is because Taituara play the game for the sector and get ahead of the game and give us information, which means we're better informed. Without that, essentially, we'd either spend a lot more staff time researching the stuff ourselves and or getting professionals to pay us. So I guess from our perspective, that's incredible value.
And actually, I think that reflects on the other two organisations as well. Either we get it through those sources, or we would either not get it, or we would have to utilise our own staff time and resources to research access and determine, because there is a massive volume, particularly at the moment, of central government related change advice. I think, was it yesterday, information that came out about potential changes in the Building Act, huge potential implications, a lot of potential positives, but lots of flow-on impacts. We rely on those organisations to provide us feedback at a national level about how that might work, and then we can obviously look at how it affects us directly. So I think Dwayne's explanation is probably a very good one across all of those costs. Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just got three things I just want to pursue. Now, the first one is rubbish bins, litter bins, toilets and closing and toilets cleaning. Can I just get the overall high-level summary of where we've landed with respect to this matter for 25-26?
Who's running that? Richard.
I'll kick it off. I've seen Grant's up there too, so hopefully I'll say it right. At this point in time, although we had that resolution that's going to be, understand it's going to be rescinded, is the rubbish bins will stay where they are. But what we will do from an operational perspective is those rubbish bins and those reserves that are hardly utilised, we will slowly remove them over a period of time so that most people that probably won't even be aware that they've been removed. So it's going to be, we're not going to be removing them all at once. We are going to only remove those that are less utilised or are close to other rubbish bins. So we're going to be systematic about it. As far as public toilets are concerned, they're the ones that we are closing the ones again over the winter period where they're hardly used. We'll be closing them for the 3 or 4 months. There are 1 or 2 that have been identified, like Jubilee Park and the Domain in Wakefield. The local football clubs have put their hands up and said, listen, we'll manage those, we'll clean them, we'll have all the key on them. So in effect, it's not going to be a cost to council, but they'll still be available to the public as and when they're opened. The other public toilets, again, as I say, there are some that are too close to others, and we will close them down. But there are others like the reserves like Rabbit Island, we may close for 2-3 months of the year during the winter period when they're least used. But there are other toilets in the region as well. So we're going to take an operational stance to all of this and optimise as much as we can the costs that we spend on those particular facilities. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, because we got a reaction from the public. I don't know that it was necessarily a consistent reaction, because I know that some people actually support the idea of individuals taking more responsibility for their rubbish. So the idea that we can make some change over time, I guess sitting here from a governance position, how will we get visibility of what's being achieved through this optimised program. So, because I think that we would like to see that we can make some changes. And it also goes to the anecdotes that I heard when we've been discussing this around some inefficiencies with our contract arrangements with toilet cleaning. How will we know that these are going to be changed and implemented and that we'll gain the efficiencies?
And I can answer that by saying that we've got revising the new contract that we have for parks, reserves and facilities, and those aspects are going to be covered off so that we do make sure that we do improve our efficiencies in that space. My intention is to report to the operations committee on how we progress that. Obviously being a little bit sensitive about some of those areas that we're not too upfront about what we're doing, because obviously there will be backlash. Sometimes it's easier just to ease things through, but we'll let you know from a cost perspective where we're making savings and how we actually try to stay within the budgets that we've put into the annual plan.
Thank you. That was point one. I mean, I think it's been a useful discussion all in all, which is that, you know, you kick the tyres and you get some change. So anyway, second point.
I would equate it to, and it's not a great example, but some of the work around street changes using money where you try things, and if they don't succeed, you are able to remove, change, or alter. So yeah, it's not an easy process, and it does get some form of feedback, which was quite vociferous in some locations. But I think we've arrived at a good place. I think the other key thing, just rounding out that contract, as we go forward, presuming the contract is renewed for the final 2 years, I think the staff are well aware that looking at what is included in the overall contract and what might be better done separately in terms of cleaning and rubbish bins, there is probably a whole conversation there about whether the current model of everything in one contract versus some more specific requirements might be a better way forward. So I think that's also part of moving to a more efficient system in the future.
To the Mayor, we also, you'll receive a report on the 8th of May. The agenda's not out yet, where I've written a report about rescinding the decision from the 27th of March, part of that resolution. So you'll see that then, that ties that up so that everyone in the public will know what's happening.
Cool. Thank you. My second point, if I could, it's kind of along the same lines really, because recently when we were discussing the costs of fixing breaks to our water pipes and whatever, I think the Deputy Mayor expressed a view that they seem to be costing a lot, and we're told that a lot of it is to do with traffic management. And there has been a lot of talk nationally around the cost of traffic management and maybe taking a slightly different approach to the assessment of risk. How can I get an assurance sitting here that actually we're doing our utmost to optimise the cost of traffic management based on the risk?
Yeah, as you're aware and as you alluded to, there is a more risk-based approach to traffic management, and it's not going to be a you shall do this as what the old code of practice for traffic management had. And so we're working with mainly one contractor with the two contracts. That's the utilities contract and the roading contract, to implement those over the next 12 months or so. And we would expect through that there will be savings made. And I know that particularly on the roading one, there's a lot of traffic management in that space. And we're looking for significant savings there. When I say significant, probably in the 50 to 100,000, Jamie could confirm that, but that's the sort of figures that will probably be saved over 12 months, maybe more. In the utility space, same again, bearing in mind that when you are fixing a water main in a live lane, there's obviously a risk-based approach required. So we're not going to see the removal completely of cones and signs and that sort of thing, but we will probably see less of the manned points at each end and people coming and going and that sort of thing. So there will be more of a risk-based approach to it, but that doesn't mean that there won't be some sort of traffic management in place.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, but so what it might mean is if we've currently costed our program of work on our historical approach that we've had to follow, and maybe we can make these savings, then that could be a positive news story because we may have some surplus budget provided.
I suspect it'll reduce the pressure on the over expenditure rather than surplus budget.
Oh, funny. So just my third point, I just want to explore, I think in a previous workshop, we got an update on how this proposal would impact on the representative properties across the district. And as we learnt when we went through that information, it's quite significant in terms of how it falls, particularly if you're having wastewater and drinking water as opposed to not. So I'm questioning in my mind actually the narrative around should we land this an 8.8% rates increase. Now, I know.
So revenue, this is the interesting conversation, isn't it? We have all the time. So the 8.8% probably no one will get that. Well, somebody might. But as you correctly point out, it will fall very differently on different properties. And the narrative around rates increase versus overall revenue increase is important. And then the explanation of the difference between the two things. So whether that's in the consultation document, which I presume we are about to see, did someone say, Amy, on Thursday next week? So that might be the appropriate place to be very clear about the difference between the two things, and also whether or not we are including that list of representative properties in some of the communication or not.
I get that point in terms of that might be the time, but actually what I'm wanting to signal is to give the staff and the comms team plenty of time prior to the 8th of May to think around how this can be articulated. I mean, sitting around the table, we all get an 8.8% rates revenue increase. We understand that, but I'm telling you, there's probably not one single ratepayer that understands that. And so we have to think about how we communicate it in a way that's understandable. That's my plea.
Yeah, so thank you. I think that will have been clearly taken forward, and hopefully one day we'll get to the place where we can explain it very simply and everyone will understand, but I suspect that's a way off yet.
Yeah, well, it's been 25 years.
It has. So I've got Deputy Mayor Bryant, Councillor Ellis and Councillor Greening.
Thank you. Excited about my questions. Just under council operations, firstly, in relation to that 1.4.11 reducing the budget for publicity, and the comment there about our ability to. But will that have any effect on what we're doing now, newsline wise, or anything else, or is it just for unplanned publicity? Someone able to answer that?
Deputy Mayor, to use your phrase, Deputy Mayor, unplanned publicity. If you recall, we had quite a conversation about Newsline, and the end result of that conversation was that for the moment, at least, we should leave Newsline as it is. So what we're looking to do there is make efficiency savings that lead to that that overall budget reduction.
Right, and then secondly, at the point below it where it's reduce elected members' budgets for travel, training, computer expenses, accommodation and meals, etc. by 74k per annum. Is it someone able to tell me what it currently is that we're reducing the 74k from?
Not off the top of my head, I can't, but I will find that information and get it back to you before the end of the day.
I suspect we haven't been utilising it.
No, that's what I was thinking. If we can reduce those,
the amount of travel and has been not anything like
minimal.
It has been previously.
Routinely underspent.
Yeah. And then over at community infrastructure, just in relation to transport, and for you, Richard, just around the Mapua ferry, cost 103 increase. I'm not sure if Richard's listening.
Error in budget, apparently.
Yeah. So how did we make the error that significant?
I'll own that one if that's all right, Mr. Mayor. I think there were some transposed numbers in the entering of that budget through the LTP, to be honest. So it's a correction.
Thank you. And then finally for the questions, just that under community infrastructure reserves and facilities, and I just heard Councillor McKenzie asking about traffic management. But under the reserves, there's providing traffic management budget of 71K just for reserves and facilities seems a lot of money for, one would assume most of that work's done not in the road corridor. So it seems quite a lot of money for traffic management.
Yeah, this covers trees along the road corridor as well as within reserves. So there are and trees along frontage of reserves and that. So in the past we've actually covered that out of the current budgets, but we felt we needed to include that. Now, I am not sure. I haven't checked the figures. I'm not sure whether 71,000 is based on using the LCOPFM or whether it's the new risk-based approach. So I'm not sure whether that's that figure's been accounted for.
Right. And so yeah, we one way or another we're spending quite a lot of money on traffic management. As you take all the other
One way or another, we're spending
a lot of money on traffic management. That is correct.
Yeah. So any opportunity to lower that cost should be taken. But other than that, you know, I'm happy with the report and reasonably comfortable where we've ended up with the proposed rate increase from, I know it's higher than we proposed in the LTP. We are going to consultation and we will hear feedback from the community. But with that, I am actually happy to move the resolution in its entirety at this time.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Right. Is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. So now just for clarification, I've Councillor Ellis, Councillor Green and Councillor Kinnamont and Councillor Hill. Oh, okay. All good. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for your questions. It's great to have we've thrashed them out quite extensively, a lot of them. So it's good to hear them being discussed because we've heard so much about them, but the members of the public haven't. So I appreciate everybody's input into that. Can I just check one thing in 6149 regarding the outsourcing of the budget for the elections? What a great result to see that drop by 117K by outsourcing that. But can I please have some confirmation around the referendum on Māori wards? Who's picking up that cost and has it been included in that budget?
Elaine.
Kia ora. Yeah, the cost for the Māori ward poll is included in our contract with our electoral provider.
Excellent, thanks. That's a great result.
Thanks, Elaine. Councillor Greening, then Councillor Kinnamont.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, probably more for the benefit of the public who may be listening. Can you just indicate what our current net debt limit is? Can you also indicate what the current FTE count is? And will the projected FTE count at the end of this annual plan period that is being discussed today, what will that be?
Okay, so I'll come back to Leonie in terms of FTEs. And in terms of debt figure, Matt.
Apologies, I might just have to have a quick look to figure it out, just to find it and then report back here.
Yep, you can look very quickly.
Well, it'll look that's going to find the right area.
FTEs. And the second part of that question is, and I presume this is a question you don't know the answer to. Yeah, we absolutely should know what the current FTEs figure is, but what happens at the end of this period, given the direction the council has provided around a reduction in overall cost, how that falls and what number of FTEs that may or may not impact on will be hard to know because we don't know quite where those savings are going to be found. So that could be a smaller number of higher paid roles or a larger number of lower paid roles. We won't know that until the end of the annual period.
So leaving aside the reduction, then what would be the projected FTE count? in the current plan?
Current FTEs.
Current FTEs is 416.
So 416 is the current amount.
We will stay within the salary budget, I think is a better question, because one FTE could cost you 110, another one could cost you 50. So I don't think actually the number of FTEs, it's actually about the whole salary budget, which is the conversation we had at the workshop. And
Okay,
so reducing that by 1.4 million on the salary line. Now that could be, that, as you know, and you're probably very well aware, that it will depend on the actual salary range that those people are on, how many FTE that would actually be. So at the moment, we've got quite a lot of vacancies, and we are scrutinising every one of them. But again, the councillors have been very clear that they don't want us to drop our levels of service. So that's always front of mind.
I suppose what I'm conscious of is that we're projecting to reduce, while at the same time in this annual plan projecting to increase some FTEs as well. So it would be good and probably useful to get a more accurate indication of where things are going in terms of FTE counts, because I suppose if people were reading through this, they'd see some, for instance, compliance, potentially coming in-house, which would increase the FTE count, and at the same time you're then reducing it. So the net effect not necessarily is 1 point.
But the net effect that impacts ratepayers is the amount of money that we spend on whatever number of FTEs there is, and the clear indication from council is that needs to be $1.4 million less than current. That is the key thing for the ratepayer, is the amount of money. How that's made up, whether that's 416 or 410 or 421, if it's $1.4 million less as directed, that is the thing that impacts on people's rates.
It should be, if I can just clarity around the 4.16 FTE that was given as of today and what that financial figure is. I would expect that financial figure, the 4.16, whatever the financial figure is, and maybe Leonie can share it, that would be the point where it's reduced from. And can she clarify whether that will occur?
I'm not sure about what 4.16 is. There's 416 FTE. My direction, the direction I've received from the elected members at the workshop was to reduce the salary line, and as the mayor's pointed out, whether that's 405 FTE or 420, so long as I can keep within that budget and not impact the levels of service, which the councillors also have asked me to do, then I believe that that's all I need to do, is to make sure that we meet that salary budget, and we are working through that, because as you might be aware, it's a dynamic environment. People leave, we have to decide whether to replace them, and there are extra requirements that we're required to do that we need to bring resource in for. So, I think if you leave it to the operation of the organisation to be able to determine who and what those roles might be.
Oh, I'm leaving it totally. I just want to know the net figure, and I'm hoping the net figure, the 1.4 you've already projected to reduce, is a reduction from the current amount that we are funding 416 from.
I think we're going round and round, but I think we're all very clear.
Yeah, so I mean, if that financial figure can be provided to me, that would be great for the 416. That would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. In terms of that, sorry, net debt figure.
Yeah, net debt figure, the dynamic net debt figure, based on the 299 million that we're expected to get to at the end of 25-26, is 344 million. So the dynamic is 344. The actual figure will be 299.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just reserve any further comments in the wider debate, which I assume we're going to have.
Yes, we have a mover and seconder. So once we've been around the current speakers, we have a resolution. So I will come back to you for your thoughts on that in due course. Right, so now I have Councillor Kinnaman.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Tom. Sorry, Tim. Following on from Councillor Green's and also Councillor Walker's inquiry, the CEO is predicting to reduce the expenditure on staff by $1.4 million. there's no debate on that. You could have actually come in at 0.7 of a million and we wouldn't have been able to debate.
No. So just for clarity, just for absolute clarity, the direction the council provided, so it is the council's direction to the CEO to reduce the salary budget by $1.4 million. So it's not the CEO's direction to us, it is the reverse. We have directed through this resolution, if it be passed, that is what we expect the CEO to deliver, not the reverse.
No, that's okay. So the figure is locked in at 1.4 million.
That is what's currently in the resolution, correct?
It seems like a chicken and egg situation where
the world is full of chickens and eggs.
Yeah. So I'll need some help off here, I think.
So the current resolution directs the CEO to reduce over the period of the next annual plan timeframe the overall salary budget by $1.4 million. And should it be passed, that will then be over to Leonie and her executive leadership team to work through how that works. As Leonie's already indicated, that comes with a associated indication we don't want to see that kind of frontline service delivery reduced. So that will be a challenge, but that is why we have a budget and a process to go through. And we won't really know the outcome of that until the end of the next financial year.
So if we said, no, that seems far too steep, you could do, say, 700,000. How does that affect the budget, the rates increases and things like that? There's no debate about that.
That's the debate we're in now. You're welcome to argue that you don't believe that and not support the resolution if you wish to reduce the saving. Alternatively, given this is going out for consultation, when we get the feedback from the community before we finalise that decision, if there's an outcry about the reduction and stuff, which I suspect there won't be, then we can revisit it before the final annual plan is finalised.
So where's the information that's been given to me about this $1.4 million? I don't see anything. I can't debate anything because I'm not being given any, apart from what Councillor Greening has said now. I don't have any more information. So how can I debate if I don't have it?
I'm not sure what more you need than the direction of the council to find a statement. I'm not sure what more. So as and Councillor Walker asked the question, we have chosen, so rather than to say a specific number of staff or to choose specific activities we wish to see cut, we have chosen or are choosing to take a dollar figure and then expect the organisation to find those savings across the organisation. So there isn't more information, precisely because that's the method we've chosen to go down. We were offered all sorts of choices about what you want to not do, what services do you not want to do. One of the ones that was raised with rubbish tins, we've tried that, changed track. So I'm not quite sure what else you need to understand before we go out to the community to find out what their view is.
Through the chair, Councillor Kunnamov, I can see that you're really concerned and what that impact might be for staff as well as levels of service, and I absolutely understand that. Look, we do have vacancy lags. We have people that leave. We can't recruit straight away. We can't fill a role. For example, I know we've been out 3 times to try and get a senior legal advisor. Can't get one. That's been months since that role, and so that's what I would call salary lag. And now we've pivoted a wee bit and thinking, okay, well, how else could we provide a service in a different way that's also cost effective? So it's a dynamic environment. So we use salary lag. We will look at roles that are vacant that we actually say we need to rationalise. So every role that is vacant or a new role that someone wants to recruit for example, I know in Kim Space we've brought some services inside which has actually brought up that FTE number. There was a cost somewhere else though, so it's not kind of like we're increasing cost. they come to the leadership team and they have to have a really solid business case of why that role is absolutely needed and what the impacts and risks the organisation, our levels of service, before we make a decision on whether we can go to recruit. So we're always going to, you'll see recruitment out there still. It's not like we're stopping it. We can't do that. It would be a false economy to do that. So I had the confidence that I would have thought back on it if I felt it was actually an impossible target, or I would have come back and said, well, actually, do you realise that we won't be able to do this A, B, and C anymore? But I feel confident with the the last year or so that I've been here, that we can actually accommodate that with rigorous management. So, and the leadership team has certainly bought into that. So, yeah, I can see that you're struggling with that. So I hope that helps.
It gives me great confidence. Thank you.
And ultimately, it will then be for the council to support the decisions that are made to implement our direction. So, yeah, there's a bit of water to go under this proverbial bridge. But as in the answer to Councillor Greening's question, you won't really know until we get part way through the year and then towards the end as to how that's all played out. Okay, thank you. So now I think I have, so I'm going back round. So just so we're clear. So now I've kind of had questions and conversations. So now if people have opinions about the resolution and views on it, I will take those and then we will move to put the resolution post everyone having an opportunity to state their position. So Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one last quick question, and it's following on from Councillor Greening's question. So, Leonie, $1.4 million less than current budget. Does that take into account the extra $300,000 that's included in 6.71, or is it we minus 1.4 million off this year, but then additional 222 and 79 in the environmental space? So I'm unclear of whether that, if it's 1.4 million reduced off this year's budget is the baseline, or in fact it's reduced off this plus then we're going to add another $300,000 in.
Sure, what the question is, sorry.
So your challenge is to reduce the current wage cost by $1.4 million in the current year.
Yep.
Got that. But in the environmental insurance, we're asking for an extra 220,000. Is that on top of the 1.4? Is that, I'm unclear. So are we saving 1.7 or are we saving 1.1?
Oh, good question. Right. No, the 1.4 million is that will be, we include on top of your. Okay, how do I explain this? We've actually allowed in the salary budget for bringing in those roles in house. Right. So it's in the salary budget now, yes. And then we give you the salary budget, and I'm taking 1.4 off that. So yeah. Is that an easier way to explain it?
That's an easier way to explain it. Thank you. And so what I've got, I was just so when I spoke earlier about the extra costs from government just in the water space, it's quite ironic that we kept told to cut costs, stay in our lane, don't kick the can down the road. And I read in the newspaper around our hospital system and how long multiple governments have kicked that down the road. So it's not a very even playing field. Thank you to the staff, and I guess the dilemmas we've had around here in terms of the double-digit original number wasn't palatable to anybody sitting around this table, and the 8.8 where it's landed, although not ideally where I would have liked to have seen it, it's a heck of a move from where we were, and I'll be absolutely pain in there, and I guess I've been drawn into the loophole in terms of let's reduce staffing costs and do that. But when you come to tangibly say, what do you want to stop doing? That's when the rubber hits the road and it's really difficult. So you have my support through the $1.4 million decrease. I know that's going to be an uncomfortable task. I know that the people work hard here and do a really good job. And in an ever-changing environment, we were asked to do more by government or change what we do. Write a new policy because we've got something else coming down the train. So that's all the hard stuff to explain to the people in the community who are absolutely hurting. And so thank you for the work you've done, and I'll be supporting the motion.
Yes, ironically, I was asked yesterday whether I had a view on David Seymour saying council should play a greater role in encouraging school attendance. So it's like, 1 minute you can't win, can you? Every day you turn around and it's don't do this, don't do that, stick to core services. Next minute it's mayors and council should play a greater role in school attendance. It's like, gosh, it never ends. Who's next? No, feel free to not necessarily take up a speaking slot, but Councillor Walker, then Councillor Mailing.
Thank you, through Mayor.
I just want some reassurance that, you know, when we went through this process with the long-term plan and we chose a whole different model to do, which was our must, shoulds, coulds, and that kind of has come to bite us a few times. One example is the Mapua ferry, for example. Do we now know that with all these workshops that most of us have attended and all the conversations and the bantering going backwards and forwards and re-looking at budget line by line, are we 100% certain that there are no other little, oops, we hadn't included that in error?
Dwayne will be. He'll be brave enough, I'm sure. Dwayne.
Through that, I think it's a very fair question. And what I can say is that the line by line scrutiny has been quite high through this process, really high. So I can't give you a 100% bulletproof thing, but there've definitely been a higher level of scrutiny at the individual GL line, right down to micro dollars, much more than the LTP.
Thank you. We have that on record. Very good. No, and then on another note is that, you know, I never felt comfortable with the 10 point whatever. I hardly feel comfortable with where we're at, but it's more appetising than it has been. I know that I hear a lot from a herding community. Interestingly enough, I went to an AGM on Monday night and I was challenged as to why I'm not putting the rate up more so that we could get even a better service. So this is a guy that lives rurally, by the way, outside of my ward, and gets very little for his rate, but is quite happy for us to put it up because he wants more level of service. So damned if you do, damned if you don't, but I will support this because it is a consultation document we're going out with. This is not the final piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Maitling? Well, I will be supporting this as well, but we just need to remember that within our communities, it's not even. 50% of our communities people have mortgages. Others don't. Others are on fixed incomes. Others aren't. So whatever happens, it's not even. And rates, as I think I remember the Mayor saying in previous CEOs, is a blunt tool. And if you look at our increases here, certainly our Three Waters increase is the significant part, and that's only going to get worse going forward. So we need to tell that story in the document and with our communities. And I think what we've got in front of us, particularly in the local waters done well, looks very uncomfortable and not a good system from what I've seen. And I've got much more descriptive words, but I won't do it in front of the news media today. Because I mean, it's just, no, I'm not going to do it today, Matt. And it really concerns me because it just changes all the time. And it just gets worse from one government to the next in some ways. The local water's done well and then the previous system. So we need to tell the people that this relates a lot to stormwater, wastewater and drinking water going forward. And it's going to get worse because the standards are going to improve what we have to do. And the fact we're going to be audited 3 times, just a load of rubbish. But we tell the people and then we get ahead. So no, I've been quite polite. But I will support this and we need to tell the people why. Thank you, Councillor Maitling. Councillor Greening.
Did I have my hand up? Don't think I did. I'm happy to entertain the debate now if you want me to.
Yes, well, you are the last. I haven't got indications, so okay. Currently you are next on the list. So
fantastic.
Over to you. Yes, it is fantastic. You are correct.
Okay. First of all, can I just correct an earlier observation made at the start, which is I think it was said that we scrutinised every line in the LTP. I don't think we did. I don't think we did scrutinise every line in the LTP. In fact, I recall the CEO flatly refusing to explore FTE reductions in the LTP process.
So just for clarity, just so we are clear, what Dwayne's answer was in response to the question from Councillor Walker was that we have actually scrutinised the lines more in this annual plan process than we did in the LTP. So just for clarity.
Yeah, I'm just making the point that I think we didn't scrutinise every line which was suggested. Anyway, I believe the public should be concerned with this annual plan. The trajectory, I don't believe, is very good, and the submission period is quite short. I think it's from the 12th to the 25th of May, which is vaguely 2 weeks. In my opinion, this annual plan is still tinkering around the edges, and it fails to address the fundamental problems. I'll let the media and the public add up the rates increases over the last 3 years to understand how deep this council has reached into people's pockets and continues to do so as it looks for other revenue ideas like paid parking, which I think is another very short-sighted and not very smart idea. So I don't support that. And like my criticism of the toilet and rubbish bin cost reductions, it's the same thing. It's not a very smart and it's not a very smart thing to do, and it's a bit short-sighted. But I certainly welcome that we're now looking to operate smarter on the toilets and rubbish bins, and that's certainly welcomed. We should have a program to reduce our escalating debt, but we don't. It's gone up from a projected 290 million to 299 million. Just remembering that debt is just deferred rates increases that have to be paid back and funded at some time. I know some councillors at the end of the workshops felt herded into narrowed options, or that staff were only tinkering around the edges rather than providing.
I'm not sure how you could tell that, because I'm not sure you attended a single workshop.
Well, you're wrong. I did attend a number of workshops. No more than one. It kind of became pointless when you weren't going to really address the major issue, instead tinker around the edges. But I'll come back to what I was saying before. A number of councillors after those meetings were emailing and discussing in the wider group that they didn't think there were meaningful changes, and that was my criticism as well. The restructuring offered up, in my opinion, has still failed to address one of the main drivers of escalating costs and the need for digging deeper into ratepayers' pockets, the escalating FTE growth over the last 2 trienniums. The longer we fail to address this, the larger the cost and the tail to the community. And while I certainly welcome a 1.4 million OPEX reduction, I do know that if you base that on an average 80k salary, that's probably 17 FTEs. And we've just added 15 FTEs since the CEO last reported on the FTE count being, I think it was capped at 401. And in my opinion, it probably needs to be reduced by about 4 million and not 1.4 million, perhaps even 6 million. Now we've added an extra 15 FTEs to the last reported 401. I also believe compliance services should be tendered out before being brought in-house for an extra 220k. TD staff should sound out the market first before bringing it in-house, and I hope they do that. There are other players in the market who are interested, and we could save ratepayers an extra 222k by just sounding out the market, and I think that should be pursued. We need to stop a number of projects that we can't afford and are not urgent. Many new projects are effectively at the bottom of the dam. It's sucked up pretty much all our debt headroom. Pretending that the dam blowout has not happened while embarking on new facilities and programs, while there is also infrastructural cost pressures. You've got a bridge you're trying to get across the line, which is probably more crucial than a community facility, a new one in Tapawera. Is just sticking our heads in the sand, especially in a growingly uncertain world economy where interest rates could very quickly flip up. And you've also, as someone has mentioned earlier, possibly going to experience a bow wave of coming water and wastewater costs that have yet to land. I've tried to do my best in these workshops to really attack the fundamental architectural problems that this council needs to address, and I've had very little support. It's great to see that there has been some shift in the thinking, but it needs to be more dramatic. Otherwise, you're going to be back around the table, no doubt next year, looking at not 7%, whatever you're projecting for next year, but probably another 3 or 4% again, because you haven't addressed the fundamental problems in the organisation. It's added a phenomenal amount of FTEs in the last 6 years that I've been here. It's really lifted, and I really don't see an improvement in the outcomes that have been achieved. I think we need to reduce our FTEs by more than 1.4, and I've suggested 4 million, perhaps now even 6, until we are in better financial health. And on that basis, I cannot support what is being proposed in this annual plan. I think it needs to be bolder, it needs to cut in harder, pretty much what central government has realised it has to do. Those organisations haven't fallen over and are agilely shifting their focus, which is basically what we should be doing strategically here as a governance group, but really have failed to do so. So I won't be supporting this annual plan, and I will be calling a division. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Is there anyone else? So just before I come to Deputy Mayor Bryant's right of reply, I think, well, firstly, as I said at the start, I would like to thank everyone who has attended all the workshops, and there has been a lot of debate. There's been a huge amount of information, and I don't think anyone's hugely comfortable with 8.8%, but bearing in mind that as a unitary council and facing all the challenges, and I think one of the things I do agree with Councillor Greening on is relation to the uncertainty. The amount of uncertainty that exists around what happens next year, let alone the year after. I genuinely believe this is one of those situations where about as far as you can see is a year from now, because the announcements that are likely to come out of central government are already starting to come out around RMA reform, as I mentioned yesterday, building consenting. These all have big, significant implications. The final decisions on local water done well, while we're out consulting on our preferred option, that has to be submitted to DIA, that has to be finally approved, and there is no certainty that that is going to be approved. So what the organisation looks like, the number of FTEs that it has, the budgets that relate to a number of our core activities are very likely to look different 12 months from now than they do sitting here today. So as much as I'm usually a very strong advocate for looking a long way down the track and trying to, think longer term, I think this is one of those situations where actually in some ways the best you can do is work really hard in the coming 12 months to set a direction of travel, to be able to be flexible and adaptable as things change, as they inevitably will, and to understand and support where central government amendments, alterations, reform looks like providing good value to our community, our ratepayers, businesses, etc. But also pointing out, as I think we're all now aware, sometimes good ideas have unintended consequences and impacts that we end up having to try and manage. And some of those things have been reflected in the discussion today around local water done well, around the creation of oversight and auditing through Taumata ROI, through Commerce Commission. So laudable aims, trying to ensure efficient and effective service delivery, ensuring that councils manage things effectively, but actually a very significant cost comes attached to those new requirements that we have to meet. So I think the council staff have very accurately reflected the feedback that they received from the majority of members who attended all the workshops. And I think they have done their very best to put it into a format that is deliverable to the community to get their feedback on. I accept it's a relatively short space of time, and that's why the consultation document and how that's worded and laid out will be crucially important, so that people can kind of quickly understand the kind of high level choices that we're making. As I mentioned in response to the $1.4 million, it is going to be, we won't exactly know how that's going to play out, where that's going to affect the organisation, but I have absolute confidence based on our feedback from Leonie and the executive leadership team that it is possible to do, and it is possible to do with minimal impact on the core services that our community expects us to deliver. So with that, I'd really like to just reiterate my thanks to everyone who's been involved, particularly elected members and staff. I look forward to the next couple of weeks and the feedback that we get, and then the decisions that we'll have to finally make nearer the end of June. So with that, I'll come across to Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor Tim. Just in my right of reply, just a few things I'd like to say. Once again, I think that it's the right thing to ask. I thank all those people as the mover of the resolution and that we're in this position now. So certainly starting with CEO Leonie leading, at times some of this process must have been a bit like herding cats, quite a challenge, but you've held the leadership team together well, and so it filters right down through the whole organisation, the staff we have in the room today and behind them, and all the work that's gone into this. To preparing the reports, the material for the workshops, the material for the consultation document. There's a huge amount of work. And I think this time we've had more workshops than we've ever had before around the annual plan, at least as long as I can remember, which is a little while. I do tend to have a reasonably good memory. And for people to think that we've been tinkering around the edges, obviously they haven't been here, because we've been having quite detailed discussions around a huge range of things. So I think the community will appreciate what we put out for this, have a study of it and make their comments. We've only got to find, as we did with the rubbish and toilets, the things that affect people every day is what you get the most feedback on. I expect the debt, there'll only be a few people that will comment on that, and I can probably name half of them. There's many other issues around this whole process, but I think we've ended up in a relatively good place, as Mayor Tim said. No one's happy with 8.8. But it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the other councils around the country. I know our daughter in Wellington and Leichhardt, they're looking at 12% rate rise, and they're really hurting, as Councillor Mailing said. And we have it here, there's young people, old people in the community, they all feel rate rises one way and another. But we put out there would be 7, so it's not a huge increase in anyone's mind, nearly 2%. But if you're up over 10, 12, and some councils even higher, that's a huge impact on any ratepayer. But those that are paying larger amounts, it's a huge impact. And I think the Councillor Mailing also covered this. The important point is around the water-related services. And I know when we looked at the impact on Murchison, which is generally a lower value community, the proposed at that time was 15%, driven by the two things, wastewater and water charges. So it really does hurt different people in different ways, but one way and another, I'm sure the community will appreciate the work we've done and its staff and everyone behind us. So I'd encourage you all to support this. We'll have a relatively short, sharp consultation period and then be able to look forward to getting on to those of you here next term, the long-term plan.
Oh, you say that with such enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You're definitely not going to be here. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bryant. I will come across to Robin to call the vote via division.
Deputy Mayor Bryant. 4. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
4.
Councillor Dahey.
4.
Councillor Dowler.
4.
Councillor Ellis.
4.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Hill. 4. Mayor King.
4.
Councillor Kinnamont.
4.
Councillor Mackenzie. 4. Councillor Mailing.
4.
Councillor Maru.
4.
Councillor Shelgrace.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Thank you. Unanimous.
The resolution is carried. Thank you very much. Again, thanks to all those who have been involved over what has been an extensive period of time. Look forward to the summary report or the consultation document at next week's meeting, and then a couple of weeks of public input post that. So with that, I will draw the meeting to a close with karakia. Kia horo te marino, kia whakapapa panamu te moana, aroha atu, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Yeah.